Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hello, I'm Claire. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I created that cutout in the walls for my aquarium. So let's go ahead and jump into the item list. For this build, you're going to need one Tier 4 aquarium, several white rectangular partitions, one simple curtain, one stage panel, and one Riviera wall shelf. The first step is picking out where you want your aquarium to go. I've decided that I want to place mine against the wall in front of me. So now that I have the area picked out, I'm going to go ahead and jump down to my basement, and I'm going to start working on the glitch from below. So now that I'm in my basement, in the general area of where I'm wanting my fish tank above me, I'm going to go ahead and double check my position. I'm going to do this by grabbing a stage panel from my inventory and placing it where I think the right area is above. Then I'm going to locate a simple curtain, and I'm going to place it onto the stage panel to where it sticks up into the floor above me. Once I have that placed, I'm going to go ahead and head upstairs and double check the positioning. And that actually looks really good to me. So I'm going to leave it in place, and then I'm going to grab my Tier 4 aquarium. Once I place the Tier 4 aquarium, I'm going to make sure my grid snap is turned on, and I'm going to rotate it to where it straightens out. Then I'm going to place it to where it's just behind the simple curtain. And just to double check that it's not too far behind the curtain, I'm going to zoom in a bit, and I'm going to double check the placement. That looks pretty good, but I'm not happy with how the aquarium isn't centered. So I'm going to go ahead and recenter it to my room, and then call it good. Now that I'm happy with the placement, I'm going to head back downstairs. It's now time to start placing the first of my white rectangular partitions. Making sure that my grid snap is enabled, I'm going to place and rotate my first one. I want to position it to where it's just in front of the stage panel. That's actually a bit far away, so I'm going to scoot it in a little bit more. And that looks much better. And now that the first white rectangular partition's placed, I'm going to go ahead and pull out my second one, and I'm going to align it with the first. And I'm going to be doing the same thing with the third one. I'm happy with the length of the wall, so now I'm going to go ahead and start floating my first white rectangular partition. This section downstairs that I'm going to be floating is for the bottom part of the tank. So pulling out my stage panel, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and then I'm going to place it to where it's just off center of the white rectangular partition I intend to float. Once I have the stage panel into position, I'm going to grab my Riviera wall shelf, making sure to have my snap to grid turned off, and I'm going to place it as low as it can go on the stage panel, and then quickly hit escape. I'm going to continue floating the partition until it breaks through the floor above. At this height, the partition should be poking through the floor above. However, I'm going to float it just a little bit more in order to make sure. And that height looks really good. So I'm going to rotate the partition, and then I'm going to head back upstairs. The placement on that partition is actually perfect and just what I wanted. So now that I no longer need the simple curtain, I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Grabbing another white rectangular partition, I'm going to place it, and and I'm going to rotate it to where it straightens out. And then I'm going to align it with the partition that's sticking out of the floor. Once I have it placed, I'm going to continue placing more white rectangular partitions and aligning all of them. Once I have my first wall built out of the white rectangular partitions, it's time to start floating the first one. So I'm going to locate my stage panel, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And then I'm going to go ahead and find the center of my first white rectangular partition. And I'm going to adjust my stage panel to where it's just off center. And I'm going to begin floating it just like I did all the other white rectangular partitions. This part can get a little bit difficult as there's two partitions stacked on each other, and it's a little bit hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. But if you look closely, you can actually see that there's a slight line separating the two. If you're having difficulty seeing that line, you can actually dye one of your partitions a different color, and that should help you a little bit more. Once I see that gap emerge, I know that the hard part's over. Now all I have to do is continue floating this partition until it hits the ceiling above me. Once I've got it floated to the ceiling, I'm going to go ahead and rotate it and then move on to floating the next. Having floated the last of my partitions to the ceiling, I'm going to go through and rotate them all. So I'm going to go ahead and grab another white rectangular partition. I'm going to place it and I'm going to rotate it to where it straightens out. And I'm going to align it with the partition sticking out of the floor. And then grabbing and repeating the same thing with another white rectangular partition, I'm going to start working on building the sides of this. This specific partition is going to be the sides of our wall. So I'm aligning it to the other partitions, and then I'm deciding on how far I want to cut into the aquarium with it. And I've decided that halfway into the top notch on the aquarium is a good place. The good news is that I don't have to float this partition too high. I just have to fill in that gap. So I'm going to grab my stage panel and I'm going to place it off center to the partition, and then using my Riviera wall shelf, I'm going to place it as low as it can go on the stage panel and then quickly hit escape. Now that I have the partition floated, I'm going to go ahead and rotate it to make sure that it doesn't snap back to the ground after. Now it's time to start constructing the other side of our wall. So grabbing another white rectangular partition from my inventory, I'm going to rotate it to where it straightens out, and then I'm going to align it with the floating partition below. And here I am double checking to make sure that I have it equally aligned. And remember, I'm using that notch that's sticking down on the aquarium to decide how far in I want to place my walls. So now it's time to start floating it. Grabbing another stage panel and placing it just off center of the partition. I'm going to use the Riviera wall shelf again, and I'm going to place it as low as it can go onto the stage panel, and then quickly hit escape. So now that I have that cap covered, it's time to rotate the partition and then double check the placement of my walls. So I'm just stepping back and taking a look to make sure that everything's centered. And I'm very happy with the placement of those walls. So I'm going to go ahead and head back downstairs now. So I've decided that I actually want the bottom part of my wall to be a bit taller for the tank. So I'm just continuing to float that first partition up just a bit more. And that should be a good height. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate my partition and then move on to floating the rest. The most important part of this step is making sure that I align all of the partitions to the same height. Once I have the last of the partitions floated downstairs, it's time to head back upstairs. I'm very happy with how that turned out, so I'm going to go ahead and work on getting my aquarium to fit the cutout in the wall. I'm going to do this by grabbing my stage panel and rotating it. Once I have the stage panel rotated, I'm going to grab my Riviera wall shelf and place it on the stage panel. And then grab my aquarium and place my aquarium on top of the shelf. And then grabbing onto the stage panel, I'm going to place the aquarium behind the wall. And I can actually see here that I need to raise the shelf a little bit more. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to check it against the wall again. I'm going to continue doing this until I get the aquarium to the proper height. I'm finally happy with the height, so now I'm just double checking everything else. And that looks great. So I'm going to turn my counter placement off, select the aquarium, hit escape, and then run into the walls and grab the stage panel and pull it away. Once I've moved the stage panel away, I'm going to go ahead and enable my grid snap, and I'm going to rotate the aquarium. And that is officially the last step. So now you get to step back and admire all of your hard work. I hope that this tutorial was helpful to you. If it was, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I really enjoy creating these videos for you guys, and I love meeting my fellow housing enthusiasts. I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care and happy housing.